Woo!
Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show produced by students for you. I'm Santiago Alazar, a first-year student studying media management, production, and technology. And our guest today is Brian Marsh, an alumni of UF's College of Journalism and Communications who was sales manager for WTVL and general manager for WASV. He's now a real estate agent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
All right, let's jump right in.
Yeah.
What initially inspired you to get involved in the media field?
I have always been just a media hound. I've loved it. Now, admittedly, as you can tell, I'm much older than you guys. So I came up in a different era, but it still had the same magical appeal. And so when I was a kid, AM radio, FM radio, that was what everybody listened to. Loved music. There was great music in the 60s, all that stuff. And I just thought, I want to be part of this industry, not just the music side, but radio, whatever. My dad went to UF. I went to UF because I knew that they had a great College of Journalism.
Right.
Loved every minute of it. And what's interesting is all those years ago, what made it so great is the same thing that makes it so great today. And that is the hands-on experience that you get as a student. You're not just going to classes, you're actually diving in and doing what you want to do, and that there's nothing better than that. And it prepares you so well for later on, but it also means you're having fun.
No, for sure.
Nothing better than going to school and having fun, right?
Yeah. All right, well, in 1975, you earned your bachelor's degree from the CJC. How did your time in Gainesville set you on your career path?
Well, first, does that sound like 400 years ago to you?
Yeah, maybe. more or less.
So back to being able to take advantage of everything going on here. In those days, your coaches, your basketball coaches, your football coaches, all the games were not live where you could see every Gator game on TV, all that stuff. There were only a few that were like that, just different things. Same thing with basketball. So the coaches had shows that aired, like the football show was aired every Sunday morning after a Saturday game.
Right.
Okay. So when I was still a student, I got a job through my connections here at the university shooting the video for the coach's show. So we would go with the team, we'd go to the game, we would shoot the game, come back, edit it on Saturday night. Sometimes it took all night. And then the coach would come on Sunday morning out to Channel 20, TV 20, and we would roll the show together and then distribute it out through the state. So through that, that got me my connection at Channel 20. And they said, hey, when you graduate, you want to have a job? You want a job? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I went into production there, doing mostly things like commercials, helping with the newscasts and things like that. Loved every minute of it, continued to work on the coaches' shows, all of that. It was fantastic, so creative, everything. The problem was I wasn't making any money. And so I'm like, okay, I have to work 100 hours a week to make a decent living.
Yeah.
But those guys over there in the sales department are actually doing pretty well.
Right.
And you know what? The creative piece of what I loved about production, I found in sales, there was still a lot of that. Mm-hmm. So I decided that I would make a move into sales. Okay. Did that, went down to Tampa, went up to Greensboro, North Carolina, which, by the way, is typical for this industry. You kind of have to move around if you want to get ahead. So I was an account executive on the street, calling on businesses, but I wanted to go into leadership. So I was able to do that and became a local sales manager, first at a station called WLOS in Asheville, North Carolina. And then came down to Jacksonville for what was then Gannett, now Tegna, NBC affiliate, was local sales manager there. Loved that, it was great. And then went to Greenville, South Carolina for a station for Media General up there. I was a station manager there, and that was WASV. And then I had the opportunity to go, that was at a time when cable viewing was kind of exploding.
Right.
So I had the opportunity to become a general manager for cable advertising in Jacksonville. So that got me back to Jacksonville. Did that for 5 years as a general manager there, then moved to Nashville as a general manager for Tennessee. So I had 4 markets. I lived in Nashville, but I had 4 markets reporting to me. So we had 4 sales teams and all of that. So.
Okay, it was super cool. Going off of that, in 1992, you became the local sales manager for WTLV-TV.
Yes.
Jackson's NBC 12. Tell us about that station in particular and your responsibilities there as the LSM.
Yeah, that was, again, in those days it was called Gannett, but they are now called Tegna. Pretty much same company, but my responsibilities there, we had a local sales team which reported up to me. And so I had a revenue responsibility on a monthly basis. It rolled up, of course, to a yearly basis. But we called on local advertisers. And so when people would ask me, it's like, what do you do for a living? And I'd say, well, you know those car commercials you see on TV that you hate all the time? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I do. Okay. And I said, you know, if you see it on an ESPN game or something like that, then we've sold that as football or whatever, and then we also sell our other programming.
Right.
In those days, Seinfeld, all that kind of stuff. But my responsibility was to meet that revenue goal and move the business forward as necessary.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great.
So then you were at WTLV for 9 years, and what are some of the challenges that sort of went into your side of broadcasting and business, and what did you enjoy most about your time?
A lot of things I enjoyed the most. It was creative because you could come up with new ways to sell product to customers, and that was good. And also the people. And that's honestly, any job you do, any industry you're in, it's really about the people you work with as much as anything. So that was probably the biggest thing. The challenges really probably centered around what has accelerated over the years, and that is the basic change in the way people consume media. And certainly when I was with the TV station like at TLV, you know, there were 3 stations in the market, and we did extremely well revenue-wise, and it was all great. Well, then cable came along, and all of a sudden you had all of these cable networks, and they were doing extremely well, and they were cutting into our revenue base.
Right.
And so we had to figure out ways to continue to meet those revenue goals that we had and creatively. And I did that, you know, that job for 9 years until I had the opportunity to go into, well, I went to WASV as a station manager for a little while, but continuing on all that with the industry, with viewership changing, I went into cable. And I made that change because the industry was changing, and I felt like, okay, the opportunity is really in another form of how people are consuming media, because the business model for cable was pretty good back in those days.
And then in 2002, you then became the station manager for WASV-TV, a UPN affiliate with the Carolinas. And what sort of inspired you to make this career move?
It was an independent station at first, and then it became a UPN affiliate and everything. And going from being a local sales manager, I have to tell you, for whatever reasons, I've always been driven to kind of take the next step in leadership. And so when I had the chance to go beyond being a local sales manager and become a station manager, where I had a say in the production department, I had a say in sales, I had a say in our news, we had a newscast that we did, and marketing, programming. I learned a lot about buying programming and all of that. That was the challenge, and it was great. I mean, it was so much fun to be able to do all of that and really have a tremendous impact on what the station actually put out over the air, programming-wise. Right. And to me, that was wonderful, and I really enjoyed it.
Then in 2010, you became the Vice President General Manager at Comcast.
Yes.
For 5 markets. So how did your role sort of change in that?
It changed in the sense that first, it was a whole different area of the country I'd never been to in Nashville, much bigger market, much bigger responsibility. And it was really less of day-to-day operations and more of working with leadership in each of those markets and working with them they were a smaller group, but they had all the salespeople, everybody that rolled up underneath them. So it's a different animal when you do that. And I think from a leadership standpoint and from a just working with people, you have to understand the difference in roles and what you can do. But again, it comes down to, and this is the same as you get out of school and you take your first job, the leadership you work under needs to teach you what to do and then allow you to go do it and let you use your own creativity. That's how you find success. And I really enjoyed being with Comcast during those days. It was a wonderful time to be with them. We had wonderful leadership. Hired a few Gators. We had some people that worked for us, and so that was always good.
Yeah.
And it was just a good time all around.
No, awesome. So over the time you've worked in broadcast media, how have station operations and ad buying evolved with the growth of digital and social media?
Yeah, great question, because it's evolved a lot and at a very accelerated pace over the last few years. You know, it used to be, I think the first thing was, it used to be that most stations were owned locally. And then the first thing that happened was you got more corporate ownership. And today, virtually every TV station in the country is owned by some corporation. Nothing wrong with that. It was just a fundamental change. And then as viewership changed, technology really advanced everything. And you know, I learned early on in my career, you can get concerned about all those changes and worried because you like to do your job and be comfortable and know what to do and all of that. But technology is not going to allow you to be comfortable. Change is going to happen. So embrace it, stop worrying about the past and worry about the future. And that to me is the most important lesson. But in particular with ad buying, once viewership, cable started it with what we called fragmented viewership versus the large audiences that the TV stations would bring in. So we became fragmentation experts. That's what we called ourselves when we were selling cable advertising, and we were very successful with that. Until all of a sudden, streaming came along, and people are watching. You know, everything's digitized now, and they're looking at all of you have all of these different platforms for advertising that never existed anymore. The biggest thing with all of that was not just the competition of it. It was the measurement of it. How do you measure that? How do you ensure that you're getting your ROI if you're an advertiser? That was something the industry struggled with for quite a while, but they've overcome that largely. And the other thing was, it's one thing to, if you have a TV station, to put a schedule together for an advertiser that says, okay, you're going to run 3 spots in the 6 o'clock news this week. You're going to buy this football game. So you have 40 spots this week. That's it. So I went from that to somebody in cable that was buying a few hundred spots a week. So it was a whole different thing. And now with streaming, you don't buy it that way. What you do is you determine who is your primary target audience. And we have software that allows us to know where that audience is, and it's more just wherever it is. It's not a program that's being bought. It's really more of a network or anywhere where there's a propensity to find that target audience. So there's been a total shift in the way schedules are put together. It's now done more with you as a salesperson. Your job is really to go out, speak with the business. What are your goals for the next month? What is the target you're trying to reach? What type of promotions do you have? All of those kind of things. Okay, thank you. What's your budget? All right, now I'm going to go back, I'm going to get on my computer, and I'm going to feed all of that into our database that's going to then extract where this schedule should run in a dynamic way. So it's not, you can't print a schedule out and take it out to your advertiser and say, here's the programming you're going to run in.
Right.
You have to do it in reverse because the computer looks at the data, where can that audience be found? And as the month goes on, it continues to look and find it and airs it on the fly. And then at the end of the schedule, you have an affidavit and you have ways of proof of performance that you give to the advertiser and say, okay, here's where we ran all of this and it reached this number of impressions that's what we agreed on. This is your budget, here's your cost per thousand, that's what we did. And that's the way it's all done now. It created a lot of issues with our salespeople because they were used to being the experts on how to build the best schedule for a client. And they had a hard time letting go of that. Because the truth is, and in cable, we didn't rely on Nielsen ratings. We had our own set-top boxes, gathering information by the second on viewership in every one of those homes. So we knew exactly what people were watching and where that audience could be found. So there's that has changed so dramatically in everything. So if you're a salesperson now, and I always try to tell my people, and this is where my production background comes in, okay? Where this is delivered is immaterial. Don't get caught up on that. What's important is, what is that message? What is the message the advertiser wants to deliver? And if you think about what we do, it all comes down to this, okay? All we are doing is somebody's got something to say, either an advertiser or whatever, newscast or whatever. They've got something to say over here to somebody over here, okay? And how it gets there between the two, we shouldn't get caught up on. We should concentrate on what is that message and make sure that this person over here sees it. If we do that, we can be successful, and this industry will always survive. But if you get caught up in the delivery mechanisms, then basically you'll not know. You won't be successful.
Super, super cool how all the information is gathered and everything. So in sort of your terms, what do you think is the factors that create the best advertisement with that information?
Yeah, and great question, because I think it's the most critical piece of the success of advertising. So the first thing you've got to do is you really have to understand what that client, what that business is trying to accomplish. And a lot of times they really don't know. You go into a business and say, okay, what goals do you have to meet this month? Well, I just want to make my nut. You know, I've got to do this. And they're very generic. They're not thinking in the sense of, how do I do this? So what we would do is try to define who was it that was their best target customer, okay? Not just anybody. Who is it they're trying to reach, okay? They have the highest profit margin, they're the easiest to work with, all of those kind of things.
Right.
Once I have that, then I can say to the business, what message is important? What do you want to say to them? Do you have a sale coming up? Are you doing something new, expansion, those kind of things? Once you have that, then you can really start crafting. Your message has got to say something to the target customer that will get them thinking. And frankly, there are two ways to do that. Again, you can do something that is more call to action, that is designed to get people to go ahead and do something right now because you're putting a sale on and it's such a big deal, it's going to drive people in. There are other businesses that are more long-term messaging. It's more about continuing to establish who you are and why you make sense to that customer when they need you. If you're an orthopedic place, which is it's a huge category now. You don't just wake up one morning, get up out of bed and say, hey, Mabel, I think I'll go get my hip replaced today. You don't do that, right? But when you do have an issue, you need that seed planted in your mind, not only of who to go to, but that feeling of this is somebody that I can deal with, okay? Right. I feel like it's okay to call and make an appointment because I think the experience is going to be pretty decent. And that's really what the messaging has to be. It's got to be all about how is that going to be received by the intended target.
So sort of going off of that, from your experience, is there a certain organization or group that you've worked with that you think has like the most effective ads, and what factors do they have in there that you agree with?
Yeah, I go back to who I remembered. We had a lot of car dealerships where there were plenty of them that you just got sick and tired of watching the commercials. I mean, you really did. But then there were others that approached it from a whole different angle, and it was more of an emotional pull. And those types of ads, I think, for me, and I think, look at the Super Bowl ads, the ones that run on Super Bowl, most of them have emotional pull. They're either comedic or they're trying to, pull at your heartstrings or something like that. And I think those are the ones that, to me, are the best, and the people that do those are the best. I've obviously worked in television all my life, but I still remember, you probably don't, but there was a radio campaign that was fantastic, and it was called Real Men of Genius, and it was a beer commercial, I believe. I think it was beer, but they were some of the funniest things I've ever heard. And And because they were spot on. It was one of these things where it was almost like a comedian does, where they observe something that we all observe, but we don't really recognize it until they point it out.
Right.
And this Real Men of Genius was the type of thing. Like it was like this, we salute you. And among the things that the people they saluted were the guys at football games that shoot the things out, that shoot the T-shirts out to the crowd, we salute you because they're so important and all that stuff. Right. It was a whole campaign built around that. But I remember when football season started every year, I couldn't wait to hear those commercials. So those are the ones that I think have the most impact. And it takes a lot to be able to do that. And it takes a lot of thought, but thinking about how that is perceived. And to me, the people who have the genius are the ones who can do that, effectively.
In 2019, you worked for Effective as Vice President of Sales. Tell us a little bit about Effective and the role you held and how it was sort of different and the same.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I first went to work for Comcast, it was called Comcast Spotlight. That was the advertising side. Mm-hmm. So as the industry changed and evolved, we did what a lot of companies do. We changed our name and rebranded ourselves from Spotlight to Effective, okay? And the idea was, it was to get the message across that our advertising, using the data, using analytics, using all those things, it was more effective advertising.
Oh, right.
But it signified the change that had gone on in the industry and was continuing to go on. And so what we were really in charge of helping our clients navigate through all of this change.
Right.
Because they were so used to just buying television programs, hey, what's my schedule, what am I going to do? And frankly, the biggest issue in all of that was working with local advertising agencies, because most of those people did not have access to the newer tools. I was extremely fortunate to work with a company like Comcast. I don't know how familiar you are with Comcast, but we own NBC Universal. We owned, of course, all the cable things and everything, 130,000 employees. We had access to everything we needed. Mm-hmm. There's a company called Freewheel that serves almost all the ads that are out there in the digital world. We own Freewheel, all those things. So we were at the forefront of trying to understand all of it. Nobody really understood it, but at least we had the capability and the technology, and we were able to figure out how to utilize it. We were some of the first to get people away from Nielsen schedules, and because Nielsen had been, basically the gospel for how you measure effective ad campaigns. Well, the problem is if you're doing a campaign that includes linear and a streaming portion, mm-hmm. Nielsen doesn't help you with the streaming, so you can't figure out how that whole thing works together.
Right.
So those times were difficult. And challenging, but also extremely exciting. And I feel like, and I would say this, people who are in the industry coming out of school just like you, it's such a wonderful time because there's still a lot of chaos out there. And the truth is, real innovation and real opportunity comes when there's chaotic change going in an industry. So there's no better time to be in it than right now. And I look around at everybody here at the college. You're a generation that grew up with all of the digital items, phones, all of that stuff, mm-hmm. which are still a little bit new to my generation. But you have the information, you have the power to take this and run with it. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. In 2023, you transitioned out of broadcast and into the real estate world. Tell us about what you do currently.
Well, I'm a real estate agent with Berkshire Hathaway. It's been it's a lot of fun. I decided after I retired from the broadcast and the television industry, I decided I didn't want to sit around and do nothing. So one of the things in moving, my wife and I had bought and sold a lot of houses. We had some rental property. But interestingly enough, and I'm not sure how much you know about this, you probably don't, but the real estate industry is going through a massive change right now. And that, to me, it was like, I've been doing this for the last 10 years in advertising. I think I can take this challenge on. Right. And so it's been really interesting to take the lessons I learned through the change that the whole television industry has gone through and the advertising industry has gone through, and apply some of those basic concepts and do things like YouTube videos and do all sorts of social media and all that. It's so much fun. I'm having a blast with it. But it is so, I feel so qualified, not just to be able to sell houses, because that's not that difficult, frankly. But I feel really qualified to be able to help navigate people through this tremendous change that's going on through the industry, because that's what I spent the last pretty much 20 years doing. So,
wow, that's super awesome that so many skills from media translate into real estate.
yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone who might be aspiring to work in the broadcast field, or maybe even from broadcast to real estate? What would be your advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, there's a lot of things I could say, but the truth of the matter is, life really comes down to some basics. And when you feel like everything is sort of getting constricted and you get, your head's about to explode because you don't know how to handle it, a lot of times you just back up to the 50,000 foot view and you go back to the things that you know are true. And that relationships are the most important things. They still drive everything, more than technology, more than anything. When you're trying to get a job, okay, when we talked about this in an earlier session, try to get jobs through broadcast corporations or things like that. They're big companies, and now today they have a system where you apply online, you have to go through talent acquisition, you have to go through all these steps, and you hope your resume makes it through so you can get an interview. But the truth of the matter is, there are ways to circumvent that, not circumvent it, but to help that process along. And that is to call somebody in these companies, not when you're looking for the job. Look up who is somebody that's a leader in the division or part of that company, and get a relationship. Call them and say, hey, I'm just coming out of college. Would you mind if I had a conversation with you? I just want your advice and some things like that. You will learn more about the inside of that company, and you'll also get a friend who might be able to help you when that job is available. Things like that, but it's all about people. The truth of the matter is, everything in life is all about personal relationships.
Right. Thank you for your insight. It's been super interesting to sort of hear about all the different things you've done and how sort of the shift in media has occurred and how you've adapted to it. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us. Until next time, good night.